A Year of Grace, Part 1. Fall plowing was begun as soon as haying was finished, but the work was hard for Skip and Barnum to do, even with the help of the ponies. Trixie and Fly were small and could not pull with strength. They were intended only for riding. Fly objected strenuously at times, kicking savagely when the tugs were being hitched. Once, when Laura was helping Manly hitch the horses to the plow and keeping watch of Rose at the same time, she lost sight of Rose. Immediately she stopped working with the harness and, looking quickly around the yard, said, "Manly, where's Rose?" And a little hand pulled Fly's tail away from her body on the opposite side of the 4 horses abreast. A little face showed between Fly and her tail, and Rose's little voice said, "Here I am." Now Manly's hands were not nearly so stiff and clumsy. Perhaps he could soon hitch the straps and buckle the buckles himself. The team was tired at night. Laura could hardly bear to see them at the unhitching. Skip with his gay head hanging and Barnum's dancing feet standing so patiently still. Manly said he would have to get another team, for he wanted to break 60 acres of sod and have the whole 160 acres ready to seed in the spring. "But the 3 years are up. Do you call this farming a success?" Laura objected. "Well, I don't know," Manly answered. "It is not so bad. Of course, the crops have been mostly failures, but we have 4 cows now and some calves. We have the 4 horses and the colts and machinery, and there are the sheep. If we could only get one crop, just one good crop, and we'd be all right. Let's try it one more year. Next year may be a good crop year, and we'll be all fixed for farming now with no money to start anything else." It sounded reasonable as Manly put it. There didn't seem to be anything else they could do. But as for being all fixed, the $500 still due on the house worried Laura. Nothing had been paid on it. The binder was not yet paid for, and interest payments were hard to make. But still Manly might be right. This might be when their luck turned, and one good year would even things up. Manly bought 2 Durham oxen that had been broken to work. They were huge animals. King was red and weighed 2,000 pounds. Duke was red and white, spotted, and weighed 2,500 pounds. They were as gentle as cows, and Laura could help hitch them up without any fear. But she fastened Rose in the house while she did so. They were cheap, only $25 each, and very strong. Now Skip and Barnum took the ponies' place and did the light work, while the cattle hitched beside them drew most of the load. The plowing was finished easily, and the breaking of the sod was done before the ground froze. It was late in doing so, for it was a warm, pleasant fall. The winter was unusually free of bad blizzards, though the weather was very cold and there was some snow. The house was snug and comfortable with the storm windows and doors, and the hard coal heater in the front room between the front room door and the east window. Manly had made the storm shed, or summer kitchen, tight by battening closely all the cracks between the board sheeting, and the cook stove had been left there for the winter. The table had been put in its place in the front room between the pantry and the bedroom doors, and Peter's cot bed stood against the west wall of the room where the table used to stand. Geraniums blossomed in tin cans on the windowsills, growing luxuriantly in the winter sunshine and the warmth from the hard coal heater. The days passed busily and pleasantly. Laura's time was fully occupied with her housework and Rose, while Rose was an earnest, busy little girl with her picture books and letter blocks and the cat running around the house, intent on her small affairs. Manly and Peter spent much of their time at the barn caring for the stock. The barn was long, from the first stalls where the horses and colts stood, past the oxen, King and Duke, the cows and the young cattle, the snug corner where the chickens roosted, on into the sheep barn where the sheep all ran loose. It was no small job to clean out the barn and fill the mangers with hay. Then there was the grain to feed to the horses, and they had to be brushed regularly, and all the animals must be watered once a day. On pleasant days, Manly and Peter hauled in hay from the stacks in the fields and fed the animals from that, leaving some on the wagon in the sheep yard for the sheep to help themselves. This was usually finished well before chore time, but one afternoon they were delayed in starting. Because the snowdrifts were deep, they were hauling hay with King and Duke. The oxen could go through deep snow more easily than horses, but they were slower, and darkness came while Manly and Peter were still a mile from home. It had begun to snow. Not a blizzard, but snow was falling thickly in a slow, straight wind. There was no danger, but it was uncomfortable and annoying to be driving cattle wallowing through snow in the pitch dark and the storm. Then they heard a wolf howl, and another, then several together. Wolves had not been doing any damage recently, and there was not so many left in the country, but still they were seen at times, and now and then they killed a stray yearling or tried to get into a flock of sheep. "That sounds toward home, and as though they were going in that direction," Manly said. "Do you suppose they'll go into the sheepyard?" "Not with Laura there," Peter answered. But Manly was not sure, and they tried to hurry faster on their way. At home, Laura was beginning to be anxious. Supper was nearly ready, but she knew Manly and Peter would do the night chores before they ate. They should have been home before now, and she wondered what could have happened. Rose had been given her supper and was sleeping soundly, but Nero, the big black dog, was uneasy. Now and then he raised his head and growled. Then Laura heard it, the howl of a wolf. Again the wolf howled, and several together, and after that, silence. Laura's heart stood still. Were the wolves coming to the sheepyard? She waited listening, but could hear nothing but the swish of snow against the windows. Or was that a sheep blatting? Must she go to the sheepyard and see that they were all right? She hesitated and looked at Rose, but Rose was still asleep. She would be all right if left alone. Then Laura put on her coat and hood, lighted the lantern, and taking it and the dog with her, went out into the darkness and the storm. Quickly she went to the stable door, opened it, and reaching inside, secured the 5-tine stable fork. Then, shutting fast the door again, she went the length of the barn, flashing her lantern as far as she could see in every direction. Nero trotted ahead of her, sniffing the air. Around the sheepyard they went, but everything was quiet except for the sheep moving restlessly around inside. There was no sight nor sound of the wolves until, as Laura stood by the yard gate listening for the last time before going back to the house, there again came the lone cry of a wolf. But it was much farther to the north than before. The wolves had gone by on the west, and all was well, though Nero growled low in his throat. Laura hadn't known she was frightened until she was safely in the house, and then she found her knees trembling and sat down quickly. Rose was still asleep, and it was not long before Manly and Peter were there. "What would you have done if you had found the wolves?" Manly asked. "Why, driven them away, of course. That's what I took the pitchfork for," Laura answered.